sensitive, and most of the what you say, most of the not most of, in fact, every country within the European Union, they do not want to give away their competency. They want to they want to retain their power in this area. But of course, the last many years, there have been certain coordination between the member states and the European Union. They have tried to come out with certain procedures, certain policies. To some extent, they have been successful, but in many cases, they have not been very successful. In fact, some of these papers perhaps will bring out those issues. And so, this is one of the hotly debated topics within the EU institutions and the member states. How do you really resolve, and particularly in the last 5 years? So, I don't want to really take much of your times. We have three papers, and roughly, if you can just keep your presentations within 10 minutes or so, so then we can have slightly some time for discussion. Otherwise, we'll just finish with your presentations only. So maybe between say 8 to 10 minutes, that will be useful, but it's up to you. Maximum 10 minutes. May I just invite now Himani, Dr. Himani Pant. Many of you will know she has recently completed her PhD from our center, and now she is working with as an associate fellow with Vivekananda International Foundation, mainly looking after Europe. And earlier, she was also working with Observer Research Foundation. So she has experience not just only with our center, but also leading think tanks in Delhi. So over to you, Dr. Himani.
Thank you, sir, for that kind introduction. I'm very thankful to the Center for European Studies, Professor Bhashwati Sarkar, and her entire team for giving me this opportunity. So, as the topic suggests, I'm looking at the course of European Union's asylum policy. Let me just begin with I'll just put it into context before coming to my main focus in this presentation. So the European Union's quest for a common asylum policy dates back to late 1990s when it established a common European asylum system to manage the inflow of asylum seekers. As you all know, the inadequacies of the system were exposed in 2015 when the Union struggled to come up with a concerted action while dealing with large inflows of people from the southern borders. In 2014 and 15, refugees and migrants crossing the Mediterranean to Europe created a political crisis within the EU. More than 1 million people, in fact, arrived in 2015 alone. The migration crisis in the Mediterranean put a spotlight on immediate needs and revealed the structural limitations of EU migration policy and also the tools at its disposal. Disputes over burden sharing among member states and a growing public and political backlash were all too visible owing to an unprecedented media coverage. Since then, the asylum policy has been one of the priority areas for the EU. Aimed at devising a comprehensive approach to migration and asylum issues, the Commission proposed a new pact on migration and asylum in September last year. And this is what is going to be the main focus of my presentation. His Excellency Ambassador Ugo Astuto already touched upon it in his opening remarks, and I will look at it in a bit more detail because it is an important marker to decide the future course of the European migration and asylum policy. So the pact follows failed attempts in the past 5 years to arrive at a common ground, the 2016-2018 reform proposals set forth by the Commission. The main migration policy background is a European agenda on migration introduced in 2015 in the midst of heightened internal tensions and conflicts in a bid to help member states. Now, its most contentious aspect was the introduction of hotspot system, which was allegedly aimed to improve the reception capacity of member states. Now, the document also proposed a relocation and resettlement system that failed to lead to a more even participation among member states. The agenda was based on 4 pillars: reducing irregular migration, border control, a stronger asylum policy, a new policy on regular migration. There was an overemphasis of security and restrictive elements in the document and a much too weak rights agenda. So what is new in this particular pact? What does it imply, and what is the way forward? A close inspection shows that nothing fundamentally has changed. The pact does not replace the 2016 and 2018 changes, but instead builds on them by adding additional elements to ensure a balanced common framework, bringing together all aspects of asylum and migration policy. The European Commission has tagged this as a fresh start on migration to build confidence and to strike a new balance between responsibility and solidarity. It does constitute a much broader and much more balanced approach than the 2016 and 18 set of proposals. There is some improvement in status quo. So in a nutshell, what the EU has done is it has tried to cater to all countries. It starts by recognizing that no EU member states perceive migration or live migration in the same way, and that each have very different but equally legitimate concerns. I'm quoting Commissioner Margaritis Schinas here, and all of which deserve to be taken into account in any European approach. So with the new pact, the EU hopes to avert a replay of the 2015 migration crisis by giving countries a choice between taking in migrants or helping them to send them back home. So essentially, it is looking for reform in the original European asylum system that came in place 20 years ago. It emphasizes on the principles of fair sharing of responsibility and solidarity. And as His Excellency mentioned, is based on 3 pillars. In fact, Commissioner Schinas has referred to these as 3 floors of a building. So it is notable that the first first pillar is the external dimension, which points that the migration starts outside EU borders. This entails cooperation with third countries on readmission, on capacity building, on legal migration to manage migration. It marks a paradigm shift as it calls for global solutions. Now, there is an emphasis on resilient management of the external borders in the second pillar. There is a focus on returns. There will be a new and mandatory screening at all borders for directing people immediately to the right procedure with strong fundamental rights monitoring mechanisms in place. Third, it calls for fair internal rules with a strong solidarity component to ensure that member states always get the support they need. To sum up, if I have to, summarize the steps that the EU would follow under the new pact is screening, border procedure, asylum procedure, return, and finally solidarity. So the key point of this new pact is that member states would have to either accept asylum seekers, take charge of sending back those who are refused asylum, or offer financial assistance on the ground of frontline EU states. I will discuss the responses of member states later. I would first like to go on, positive aspects of this pact as well as the issues that remain. On the positive side, it is notable that the Commission has come up with this pact at a time of normal migration flows. So it shows that the EU has learned from its past experiences and is preparing is preparing to avert future such incidences. At the same time, it has managed not to leave all the responsibility of migrant reception on frontline states. It remains clear to them, however, that the proposal remains a compromise, that there are countries which cannot accept the vision of an open and welcoming society. This in particular is agreeable to member states like Hungary that do not want to accept asylum seekers. However, there is no common EU list on safe countries of return, an issue that makes the proposed system complex. So this is one of the issues that remains. I'll discuss further issues as I go along member responses to this pact. So I'll in the interest of time, I will just mention this very briefly. So Germany and France welcomed the Commission's proposal. Angela Merkel was the driving force behind the new migration pact. Coming to Southern European countries, I think it could be best summed up as taking it with a pinch of salt. While they are getting something as frontline states, they remain the most vulnerable. The EU steps, while go a little ahead in what it actually had, are not far enough. The European Council needs to achieve a true balance of solidarity and responsibility. assurance on relocation is needed as per the response of the European, southern neighborhood. So there are also, they also point to the first arrival countries cannot manage migration flows alone in the name of the whole EU. For Greece, it has insisted on mandatory relocation. For Spain, again, the proposal did not reflect the country's main demand of a mandatory solidarity mechanism. So, just a quick pointer here, it is important to note that Southern European countries also met last week in Athens, where they called on the other EU states to share the migration burden. This comes on the heels of the EU-Turkey summit, which is on the 25th and 26th of March. The 5 EU members, so I'm referring to countries like Greece, Cyprus, Italy, Malta, and Spain. They have extensive Mediterranean coastlines and are the most common targets for migrants from North Africa and the Middle East. Now coming to the Visegrad countries, there is something for everyone in this pact. So Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, and Slovakia, they have rejected the idea of mandatory relocation, and some of them have also firmly opposed Europe's push for solidarity. Poland has, in fact, from the very start, rejected Southern Europe's push for mandatory relocation, citing its, catering to Ukrainian migrants. Skipping some other portion, I would, come to the main issues in this document that I feel remain. It is not a long-term program document. Instead of a 5-year program providing policy guidelines, all we had was a commission communication set forth by the Commission. And it was not addressed to the European Council. There was a legislative package that is supposed to pass through the ordinary legislative procedure for the end of 2021 following a roadmap. So it raises some questions as to, it could lead to a positive results, given short-term plans are more achievable, but at the same time, as one knows, these procedures take a lot of time and a little longer framework is needed. Second issue is, although the Dublin regulation is being...
Sorry, I can't send you direct message somehow, but you have almost finished your time. Can you just...
Yeah, I'll just take 1 minute to wind up. So second issue is the Dublin regulation, which although is being replaced with a new regulation, which is the Asylum and Migration Management Regulation. It's basically, connected to the robust and fair management of external borders and backed by new governance framework. So nothing fundamentally they accept the change of criterion. The main burden continues to remain with the external border states. Past initiatives like hotspots and similar initiatives show that extra asylum procedures or tracks can create significant administrative burdens and cost and generate more inefficiency. Finally, there's also skepticism about this option of providing financial assistance and how far can this aid go. Can states just shrink, shy away from the responsibility, and if all the development aid goes, who does it go to? The new plans to provide more aid to countries, to third countries who will take back the returnees. So who will the aid benefit? These third countries or the people who actually need them? So to sum up, my analysis of this document is that the ambiguity continues despite these proposals, and the onus would continue to remain on the frontline states. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Himani. I think you have just, your main argument is that there is very little new in this new migration pact. And what EU is trying to do is balance different interests, trying to balance through solidarity and what you call the responsibility. So now we have second speaker, Dritishri Bordalai. She's, of course, PhD student from our center. She's also going to talk about European asylum policy and the political management of refugees. Dritishri, 10 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. The topic for my presentation is European asylum policy and the political management of refugees. My presentation will account for the development of the European asylum system from the early 1990s till the current efforts of the European Asylum Support Office to enforce a common European asylum procedure. Over the last 2 decades, there has been a rise in the number of asylum applications in Europe. This has sparked intense political debate in many European countries and has led to a succession of policy changes, particularly in the countries of the European Union. In the past 2 decades, over 6 million people have applied for asylum in the EU. During the 1980s and the early 1990s, the asylum policy in Europe was a matter which was largely dealt with by individual countries. Two reasons were that factored in. One was the upward trend in the aggregate numbers of asylum seekers, and second one was the uneven distribution of the asylum applications across countries, which formed the background to the introduction of a wide range of policy reforms within the EU. In the late 1990s, this changed when the EU started a process of building a common European asylum system. This process had led to a large-scale harmonization and cooperation with regards to the asylum policy. Policymaking towards the asylum seekers and refugees has shifted away from national governments towards the EU as a common European policy has developed. This presentation will examine the basis upon which the joint EU asylum policy is effective in achieving its goals. It also intends to study the political feasibility of deeper policy integration by analyzing the processing of asylum claims and the reception standards for asylum seekers. Now, coming to the evolution of the European asylum policy, there is an important distinction between immigration policy and asylum policy. Immigration policies are often formed while keeping in mind the benefit of the host populations, mainly while deriving benefits out of labor migration. In contrast, asylum policies are exclusively built around the benefits of refugees rather than towards the host society. So the harmonization of European asylum policies was first considered a necessity when the work began to abolish internal borders in the EU. The surge of applications in the 1980s reaching a peak in the early 1990s is what led to a policy backlash, which resulted in stricter border policies such as increasing border control and the introduction of visa requirements for countries that were potential sources of asylum applicants. Cooperation on asylum policy between EU member states started gaining momentum in the early 1990s with the Dublin Convention, which established that asylum claims would be assessed by the country of first entry. Therefore, it took a major step to prevent asylum shopping. The common trends in asylum policy among EU member states was possible to identify during the 1990s, but formal cooperation between them was minimal. With the signing of the Treaty of Amsterdam, asylum policy was given prime importance and moved to the primary agenda, which gave the European Commission the right to propose legislation when the treaty came into force in 1999. Meanwhile, the European Council meeting at Tampere in 1999 laid out the plans to build a common European asylum system, which was based on the full and exclusive application of the 1951 Refugee Convention. Coming to the implementation of the Common European Asylum System, also known as the CEAS, there was a few stages involved. The first stage of the CEAS, which was from 1999 to 2004, was the Tampere program. This phase mostly focused on the harmonization of key elements of the asylum policy. It had a few directives under this, and the first one was the Receptions Directive. This directive, it established common standards for access to employment, training, as well as welfare, housing, health, and education services for asylum seekers. Second would be the Qualifications Directive that laid out common set of criteria to be used alongside the asylum applications. Then the Asylum Procedures Directive, which was laid down standards for designating authentic asylum claims, as well as covering issues such as legal assistance. So these directives were included within a stipulated time into national legislation, but they only lay down minimum standards, and they did not cover each and every aspect of the asylum policy. Coming to the second stage of the CEAS, which was from 2004 to 2010, known as the Hague Program, it involved deeper cooperation in a number of areas. For instance, in 2005, the Frontex agency was established to standardize the border controls and surveillance operations. Before its completion, it was superseded by the Stockholm program, and which was an important establishment due to it led to the development of the European Asylum Support Office, which began its operations in 2010. Certain challenges that were faced while implementation of the CEAS was in 2015, CEAS was catering to the reception and welcoming of asylum seekers, which was in its proposals. But these very legal instruments then started to check the rising arrival of refugees, and policymakers were widely overwhelmed by the in mass influx of refugees and migrants who were transiting and arriving to the EU. Another challenge would be the approach that were taken by policymakers at the EU level and at the national level, which were differing. The CEAS instruments provided clear benchmarks for countries acceding to the EU for adapting an asylum system. However, the CEAS was not common in the sense of one EU-wide asylum system, nor has it developed into a single system. On the contrary, it still consists of different asylum systems of different member states with different actors responsible for different procedures leading to different results. To conclude, it can be highlighted that the refugee flows in the past decade or so have exposed divisions within the EU. The states via which these refugees flow usually take place, and key destination countries express discontent at the EU's managing of refugee flows and asylum requests. Now that we've learned about the asylum policies, its implementations, and a few of its challenges, there's one question which arose, that what is the purpose of having an integrated asylum policy rather than policies by individual national governments? Well, what an integrated asylum policy can help is with states to give asylum to refugees, which is a humanitarian responsibility to a larger extent and to a further reach, which may be underprovided in the absence of an integrated system. Therefore, the convergence of national policies may lead to equal burden sharing. Therefore, a more systematic, integrated policy, which is centrally directed, is required. Thank you.
Thank you, Dhriti, for bringing the distinctions between the immigration policy and asylum policy, and how these policies have really evolved over the years and decades. And you also concluded that recent refugee flows have really exposed divisions within member states. Maybe later on we'll come back to some of these issues. I mean, have the divisions within the member states of the EU have been exposed only by certain refugee flows in 1 or 2 particular years in 2015-16, because after that the flows have not been really that great. So maybe this was also kind of proxy for some other battles which are being fought within the European Union institutions for so many other issues, like common agriculture policies and other issues, which, when those policies have been brought and there has been tensions among the member states, sometimes these policies are used to score something else, because there is all kind of Euroscepticism, EU skepticism, something in some of the countries in Central Eastern Europe. Maybe we'll come back to some of those issues. Now, the third paper we have by Prasanna Panda, who is a research scholars in our center. He's going to talk about broader issues of human security in the EU. So Prasanna, you have now 10 minutes to make your presentation.
Good morning, sir. Good morning to all. I'm going to present my paper on the topic of human security issues of the refugee in the European Union. European Union is established with a consensus of gender equality, liberty, democracy, rule of law, and protection of the universal human rights and fundamental freedom. These values of the European Union are common to all the member countries where solidarity, justice, and non-discrimination prevails. European Union accepted the human security as part of its security strategy in 2003 to resolve the new and emerging non-traditional security threats like hunger, malnutrition, poverty, and environmental degradation. Hence, it is essential to highlight whether this human security approach of the European Union is sufficient to protect the refugee, or how it is protecting the refugee in its approach of the human security module. The historical approach to the human security. During the Cold War era, the security discourse were dominated by the state borders, national interest, and arms race. But in the post-Cold War era, the interstate conflict are replaced in the interstate conflict, and new threats, security threats emerged. To address this, the United Nations Developmental Program, UNDP, in its report underlined the human security model in 1994. It highlighted the human security model defines the freedom, dignity of an individual. In 1999, Japanese funded and United Nations Secretariat launched the Human Security Trust Fund, and in 2001, the Commission for Human Security was established. Later, the Human Security Unit, which worked impressively today to resolve this new and non-traditional security threat. In addition to this, the countries particularly like Canada, Japan, and Switzerland effectively implemented the variation of the human security to address the security threats. Apart from this, currently, academic discourse are dominated under the research of the human security. Initially, it was addressed by Barry Bojan in its book, People, State and Fear in 1993. Currently, number of publication research highlighted this issue. The security discourse of the refugees. The refugee and asylum have never far from the security discussion. Rather, they are viewed as the deficit of the security or potential national security threat. During the Cold War era, they are prevented from the departure due to border control policy, but in the post-Cold War era or in the 9/11 terrorist attack, they are prevented to enter into the territory. The 1951 Refugee Convention underlined the definition of the refugee, and it provided some responsibility of the state to protect the refugee. Those people who are fleeing from the well-founded fear of persecution, they need to be protected by the territory where their security need to be ensured. The human security issues in the policy of the European Union. Before human security came into existence, European Union included the human security policy in its various policies and the program. For instance, the crisis management. This is the most tangible contribution of the European Union to the human security perspective. The developmental and humanitarian aid, the soft power, peaceful coordination through the diplomatic means. These underline the European Union initiative to the human security perspective. the human security issues of the refugee in the European Union. After 2015 refugee crisis, the European Union distributed the refugees to different states unevenly, and it elaborated the quota system, and where as a result various countries are assigned the different number of refugees, but this became most conflictual within the European Union. Some states like Germany committed to accommodate the refugee, whereas some states like Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary rejected the formula. As a result, it became more controversial within the European Union, which resulted the adoption of border control formula by different states to reject the enter of the refugee into their national territory. As a result, European Union came under pressure and started restricting their border to the refugee for enter into their territory. What happened? It resulted the number of migration, they could not enter into the territory, whereas they are losing their value within the external territory of the Mediterranean region. Certainly, number of women, number of child, and refugee, all the stateless people have started losing their life, which is mentioned in the United Nations Commission for the Refugee. As a result, European Union need to give its attention to protect the rights of the refugee and protection the human security of the refugee. The human security module highlights the basic referent of the security is vulnerable individual. Therefore, the refugee who are entering into the river, they are also individual, and several-fold security of the refugee need to be ensured. I, in my paper, highlighted two different reasons why the European Union need to accommodate the refugee and provided the human security model. First reason is European Union is the proponent of promotion of democracy and human rights. And all the members declared, and under the Copenhagen criteria, they have to promote democracy and human rights. In short, to promote democracy and human rights, they need to protect the stateless people as well. Their democratic right, their freedom, their health issue and economic issues need to be protected. The second reason is the original declaration of the human rights is signed by all the members of the European Union, which is established in 1949. And very popular reason is every human life is worth and equal according to the European Union, which is established under the rule of law. Due to this, the European Union need to protect the refugee since it has implicitly ensured the human security model, both its internal and external principle. To conclude, the European Union significantly underlined the human security in its policies and principle, and very significantly in some area like anti-landmine issues, which is in 1997, and providing the assistance of developmental aid according to statistics, which is 30% to the total worldwide. But it seems that since the stateless people are losing their value due to the strictness of their external border, the human security approach of the European Union doesn't suffice to meet to protect the security, and especially the emerging security threats of the refugee, that is need to be resolved through the new policies and programs of the European Union. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prasanna. So now we have about 15 minutes or so for discussion. So we have three very good papers presented by scholars on different issues concerning EU's asylum policy, how policies have evolved, what kind of issues are there, and how do they relate to human security issues. So if there are any specific question to any of the presenters, you are free to ask, or if you have even brief comment, that's also possible. So we have about 15 minutes or so for discussion. Now these papers are open for discussion. I don't see any somebody raising hand or no. In the chat box, I don't see any question.
I think Sanskriti has messaged on the chat. She has a
Go-
question.
Yeah, please go ahead, Sanskriti.
Hi, Prasanna. Uh, Thank you for your presentation. My question is to you. So I wanted to ask you, like you said, the European member states have made commitments to preserve democracy. In doing so, how far do you think national level politics plays a role in determining their commitment towards European, like so-called supranational, values, supranational values of the European Union? What do you think about the friction between, national politics, which, like we see, like there has been a rise in populist sentiment towards these issues, which again also form the core of the European system of values, democratic system of value. So what do you have to say about this friction? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, is there any other question? No. Okay, Prasanna, go ahead. You can answer the question now.
Okay. This national level politics currently, the rise of nationalist party and public pressure that is correctly evident that overwhelm the humanitarian action. And I would say this nationalist politics, which is currently emerging, that always is anti refugee aspect, which is they wanted that the nation should be free from these uh, stateless people, so that their people will get employment and opportunity and all. So this friction can be resolved, or this friction is became more proponent because the uh, policy level, the European Union should provide like the quota system or financial assistance or demand of the nation to accommodate the refugee. So that demand of the nation need to be addressed by the European Union. And second point is it is required the people to understand and to manage the resources so that the refugee issues or protection of the refugee issue could easily be resolved.
Okay, any other comment or question from any participant? No. Okay, if there
Can
are
I
no,
just come in then if there are no other questions?
okay, please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for the three presentations. I just wanted to ask, all three of you, because in the morning session, Ambassador Astuto was saying that if you look at our program, it looks like we take a very negative, kind of a reading of what is happening in Europe. And since you have been looking at the policies and looking at the, new developments so far as these policies of refugee and asylum are concerned, do you have any positive takeaways from them?
Yeah, just
Any of you, right? Any positive takeaways?
just continuation of what Professor Bharti Sarkar has asked. I mean, you can just wrap up your we can wrap up this discussion. Yes, I mean there may be a lot of issues within the EU asylum policies, but if you look at other developed countries, look at the US or look at Japan or some other countries. So how do you really, in that sense, I mean, no policy is perfect, no, nothing is perfect, but looking at things, comparing to other parts of the world, and particularly the developed part, because people go for asylum to some of those countries. And even Americans, they also talk about democracy and human rights. It's not that, they do not, only Europeans talk about democracy, and every other country also believe that, all the Western countries. So how do you really compare this? If you have some understanding with, mainly with the US and Japan, or with some other countries as well, which are where people sometimes may like to go for asylum, to take asylum. So maybe if we can just start with, in the same way panel the way you have presented. So starting from Himani, you can just take about 2-3 minutes to answer, this question.
Okay. Commenting on Bhashadi ma'am's remark, first I would like to say I think at least the EU is still sporting enough to take criticism, which is anyways a very positive development. It's not that easy to take criticism, and I think such an agenda only shows that there is still, because negative comments can result in a very positive outlook in future. It could lead to positive developments. It's basically working on your whatever is lagging at present. So that is one positive thing, taking criticism as sporting spirit. Second is, yes, there is a lot of positive in terms of what I see. As I pointed out in my presentation, the EU seems prepared enough for future. It's not showing that sort of sudden, suddenly you have this inflow of refugees, migrants. As Sir pointed out, the flow has actually been quite low. You don't know if thanks partly also, especially in 2020, to the global pandemic, but also goes on to show that if you look at other years other than 2020, the migration numbers are significantly low. So the EU is prepared enough. It is starting out future policy. It is showing more resilience. It is showing more preparedness in terms of dealing with future policy issues. That is one thing. Second thing is, when I compare it to other countries, I think the EU often comes in the spotlight because it is transparent, of course. Also because there is a lot of emphasis on values. Even if you look at the pact that I was talking about, ultimately, there's everything. There's a lot of realpolitik. There's a lot of practical measures. I mean, I'm not going to criticize everything. I mean, issues remain, but at times, the geopolitical requirements are also a reality. But because EU, at the same time, in the same vein, also focuses on values and its ideals, so that sort of puts it at the forefront of criticism from partners, from observers. When compared to other countries, I think it is still doing a great job. Supranational character of the union makes it a little more difficult, but then at least it is taking into account each member state, which is the basic idea behind the union. Yes, the fallacies remain in all policies. Even this pact, it was in the statement also, it was very much admitted that it is not a perfect pact, and I'm sticking to this particular pact. But in general, no policy is going to be perfect. But there's a lot more preparedness. There's a lot more acceptance of mistakes, which is important. And there's also a lot of scope for taking, because there will be discussions on these proposals anyway. So there's a lot of scope for future, amendments or future positive developments in this area. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Himani. Dhriti, in 2 minutes, if you can just wrap up this, whatever all the thing we have discussed. Can you just unmute, please? Dhriti, can you unmute yourself? Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, sir. Sorry, sir. No, as even though we see deep divisions within the EU taking different stands, even though there is a policy or a common policy at the top, we do see countries like Germany actually providing ongoing leadership and more solidarity in this. So that could be a positive takeaway. And also the countries, they have a sense of an element of voluntarism and in this agreement, and it talks and it also has a balancing responsibility of solidarism. And in this, they can achieve in the future to bind commitments and in the areas of cooperation when it comes to asylum policy. Also, while there might certain countries might not take the full responsibility of taking in refugees, but they also provide financial support in that regard, and they might not relocate refugees into their territories or asylum seekers, but they do provide financial support. So these are the few positive things I thought.
Okay, Prasanna. Prasanna, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Sorry, sir.
हाँ, बताइए.
Sir, of course, the European Union is like providing lots of developmental assistance worldwide. So more expectation, obviously, to the European Union to address the issue, contemporary issue in the international community. And secondly, in comparison to other states, the value of the European Union is given more emphasis because the idea of the European Union on which principle it is established, that is quite very different, and that is mm, obviously contradicts the problems of the international community through which the things can be easily resolved. Therefore, the expectation is more from the European Union, and the gaps is being highlighted because of its transparency in formulating the policies and programs.
Okay, thank you. We are just on dot to finish our session. We are very European in that sense, looks like. So I think we had very good discussion, at least some understanding of what is happening on the asylum policy. But of course, I mean, this is we are not here to praise EU in any way. I mean, whatever you feel the policies are. And there are very serious lapses, there are serious problems. And of course, there's a difference between rhetoric and actually when, policies are being implemented. But at the same time, one has to be fair because you look at forget about even developed countries. I mean, they have of course many double standards, which we always say whatever when they talk about democracy, human rights, etc. But at the same time, there are double standards everywhere, not just there. I mean, when we talk about developing countries and what happens, and when some refugees come to your country, and then you know how the politics plays out. So I think as what Professor Binod Khadaria was mentioning, I mean, no country, I mean, every country is fortress in its own way. So it's easy to finger point, others that, what they're doing. But at the same time, it's also, I mean, why sometimes we look at policies at the EU more critically, which some of you have already pointed out, but like Prasanna was saying, they do propagate some of the notions about human right, democracy, and they are signatory to certain, human right charters and everything else. So as a result, I mean, something, people expect more. I mean, you don't expect many things from China, but you will expect something from the EU. So that's why it's, more, I mean, we look at things more critically. I mean, no country is perfect, no policy is perfect. And, and the issues of, particularly on migration, immigration, asylum, and these are the national issues. And now, what another thing which has really happened is, it's not, in fact, as Imani has pointed out, it's not just only the numbers. I mean, numbers have come down. Numbers were there high only in 1 or 2 years. They have been receiving, outside labor for so many decades. But the problem is, politically, the issue is still very much alive, even if the numbers are not there. It's not because, I mean, economically, yes, there is a reality that Europe would need people from outside to work, whether they take it as immigrants, I mean, very selectively through their policies, or many people will come through asylum and other ways. So they do need people of both kinds, as Professor Khadari has also mentioned, unskilled as well as, because if you go to Europe, you see all kind of unskilled work is done by outsiders, not really by Europeans. So it's not that they do not need unskilled labor. But of course, now with all kind of mechanization and modernization, perhaps they feel that and all kind of clashes which are happening culturally. So they are very, very touchy about those issues, but they do need people from outside. And the numbers are not very high. But the problem is, politically, the issue is very much relevant, and all political parties, Professor Baswi he has done a lot of work in this area. All the right wing political parties, the way they are using it. So it's not whether, I mean, it's numbers are there or not there, but politically these are being used in every elections, every political, and so many political parties are doing it. So that's why we are looking at these issues very, very carefully. And I'm really thankful to all three presenters. They have brought very policy relevant issues and also looked at things from scholarly perspectives. Thank you, and I look forward again. This session is more or less continuation. We have another three papers now. Going with all refugees, asylum, and other issues. Okay, thank you everyone. So over to you, Professor Vasudhi.
Thank you, Professor Sachdeva, for very efficiently chairing the session, and all the presenters for your insightful presentations. We'll be now moving on to the second working session for the conference. The title is the same, European Union's Immigration and Asylum Policy, Part 2. The session will be chaired by Professor S.N. Prasad, who's Associate Professor at the Center for European Studies, School of International Studies, JNU. We'll just do a quick mic check for Professor Prasad. Sir, could you please? Great. Let me just add you. All right. The first speaker is Shumaila. Could you do a mic check, please?
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. Anuradha?
Hello, yes.
Yes, you're audible. Nagaraj?
Yes, hello.
Yes, you're audible. I just request all panelists to switch on their video just for a minute so we can add you on the spotlight and you can remove it later. Great. So I hand it over to Professor Prasad.
All right. Let me congratulate the whole faculty here, Center for European Study, as well as the members of our family, our students, research scholars, for having this kind of mega show of conference, which is related to latest issue of which is some sort of a challenge for the integration project of European Union. This is a time to congratulate to Professor Sarkar also, who has recently has accepted this chair, like Omi chair, and this is the first event being organized on behalf of this chair, along with the cooperation of our center. So we all deserve a big kudos for this. The history of human being since its inception has been, it always has been actually on migration. Migration in the sense, though, the very inception of man begin with an app which was there, which initiated on trees. But over the years, they developed skills of moving and gathering foods, going for hunting, fishing, etc. And that's why they developed a sense of migration from one place to another place, where the food stock used to stop there, or due to different natural calamities, or due to shortage of grass, due to shortage of hunting animals and all, they kept on moving from one place to another place. And the very history of human being is the history of human migration, And this is the thing, how migration, the very concept of migration, immigration, asylum, which today, these terms come to light after the formation of a state, nation states and all that. Europe, which was pioneer, like Vasco da Gama and Bartolomeu Dias and then Colombo, who discovered America. Basically, they migrated from Europe to America, and America became a colony. And it was much later when America fought war, and they freed themselves. So I'm just giving a background of migration, immigration, and asylum, all these things. So what we see today in European Union, though there is a much controversy about the issue immigration and migration, and then asylum policies. There is no unanimity. There is no unanimity on the issue. What should be the asylum policy? What should be the the quota fixed to different member states of European Union, and whether it should be imposed or it should be from within. So basically, these have been a very these migration, immigrations, and the policy related to that, asylum policies have been bone of contention, and in a way, it is challenging. Present a big challenge for the integration project as such. So but we are very eager to know what is the latest. As Professor Sachdeva has already said, it was the need of the hour when Europe became powerful economically, and there was industrial revolution, and by virtue of industrial revolution, they colonize other colony or other continent of the globe. It was needed. The migration was accepted. Recently, when there was a division of Germany, East Germany and West Germany, East Germany people were divided not to enter the West Germany, and the Great Wall was created. But after the demolition of Great Wall, the people of East Germany had a very tough time for initial 10 years or 5 years or so. They were not allowed to work after the unification also. So European society is always having this kind of problem, but they have been very, they have been able to sort out the problem by, resolving this problem amicably and all. And that's why I have been telling you, after almost 75 years of Second World War, they have not gone for Third World War. So basically, you have to learn from European society also here, particularly in present India, how they are managing, unity, diversity, democracy, and diversity, all sort of thing. But still, they are having some challenges. So and particularly, we all will be very benefited. We will be benefited to learn the new ideas or the new research you have done. Different people will be presenting paper here. It will be enhancing our knowledge of European immigration and refugee, and then it's based on those problems, asylum policy of different member states as well as the European Union as a whole. So I welcome you all and wish you all the, good luck for your presentation. Thank you. Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Since there is no response from your side, that's why I wanted to get it confirmed whether I'm
yes,
audible.
sir, you're audible. You're audible.
Okay. There are 3 papers in this session, and Anuradha will be presenting. Is it Anuradha? Yes. Samaila, I believe. Samaila, Samaila is the first, and then Anuradha second, and then Nagraj is the third one. So I wish all of you, all 3, good luck. So we can now. Samaila will now. Your time starts now, and you start.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. The topic for my presentation is European policy for refugees. its challenges and prospects. So I will start by explaining what the European policy for refugees is. So the functioning of the refugee policy of the European Union can be understood in terms of three concentric circles or regions, you can say. The first is the Schengen area, in which the European Union plays an important role by controlling the borders of the region and also managing the asylum seekers within the Schengen area. The second region includes those countries which border the Schengen area. These countries are mostly from the Mediterranean region, like Turkey, Libya, and Morocco. The European Union cooperates with these countries to effectively control the number of migrants reaching the European Union. The third region comprises the home countries of the migrants. The European Union provides funds for development projects in these countries to motivate migrants to stay back in their home countries. To unify the asylum procedures among all the member countries of the European Union, in 1999 launched the Common European Asylum Policy. So I will not explain the details of components, basically the pillars of this Common European Asylum system, because previous presenters have already explained this. But one of the contentious issues which I will underline is that of the Dublin regulation, under which migrants may apply for asylum from the country from they first entered the European Union. As most of the migrants first reach southern European countries through the Mediterranean coast, these countries have to process way more asylum applications than northern European countries. In 2015, the European Union saw largest influx of refugees when over 1 million refugees reached Europe in 2015, mostly in Greece, Turkey, and Italy, due to the proximity from the Mediterranean bases. As a result of this crisis, most member countries of the European Union have imposed a strict border control. After the refugee crisis, some northern European countries such as Germany opened their borders for the refugees, but most of the member countries could not agree on the allocation of asylum seekers. In 2018, Germany hosted the largest number of refugees and asylum seekers in Europe. The largest number of refugees in Germany came from Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. France and Sweden were the second and third largest hosts of refugees in Europe. Another challenges which the European refugee policy is facing is that there is disagreement among member countries of the European Union on the handling of migration issues in the Schengen area. The main reason is that which country should process all those asylum seekers. As member countries could not reach an agreement on handling of asylum seekers in the Schengen area, the focus of the EU has shifted towards other regions of migration, that is home countries of the migrants. To put it simply, we can say that the 2015 refugee crisis led to an external migration policy of the European Union. Under its external migration policy, the European Union released funds for countries such as Turkey and some African countries to deal with the refugee crisis. The European Union released funds for Turkey under the European Union-Turkey deal to help Turkey in handling and better protection of the refugees. There are basically two main components of the agreements. First is that all new migrants coming to Greece will be returned to Turkey if they don't apply for asylum or if their asylum application is rejected. And second component is that for every Syrian returned from Greece to Turkey, another Syrian will be resettled in the European Union. However, the agreement does not represent a sustainable solution to manage refugee flows, because as of March 2020, only 27,000 Syrian refugees have been resettled from Turkey to the Europe, while there are still 3.6 million Syrian refugees living in Turkey. Another challenge which the European refugee policy is facing is lack of legal migration routes to Europe. Currently, there are hardly any legal migration routes that allow refugees to access Europe in a safe way. Also, there have been allegations of human rights violations on the European Union's external borders. As I mentioned, the Dublin regulation, the Dublin regulation of the Common European asylum system. So it shifts the burden of processing arrivals to the southern countries such as Italy and Greece. And also some asylum seekers try to avoid being registered in the first European country they arrive to reach a more attractive destination. So the challenges the European Union is regarding its refugee policies facing is regard to that it is focusing on short-term crisis management of the refugee policy rather than focusing on long-term solution. And I will suggest some way forwards that member states can adopt in order to achieve a more robust and comprehensive refugee policy. The first that there should be that member states should increase the number of resettlement places available. The European Union resettlement framework proposed by the European Commission in 2020 might be an option in the future, but it does not oblige member states to resettle refugees. It is important that the member states contribute to the process of refugees according to their individual capacities. Another point is that most refugees do not have formal qualification or the documents. So these refugees may not be able to access regular labor market because of lacking formal qualifications and language proficiency. So member countries can help refugees in finding employment by promoting a skill training program and language training. Another challenge that the EU and its member states are facing is that of managing migration effectively, and member states can also align their national interests and find common ground to tackle this massive challenge together. So to conclude, I will say that though the European Union is taking many measures to deal effectively with the problem of refugees and migrants, there is still disagreement among member countries on several issues related to migrants and asylum seekers. To solve this, member states should effectively implement the existing policies relating to registering and identifying people at their borders. And for solving the refugee problem in the long term, it is necessary that member countries of the European Union must hold a regular dialogue, taking into account the different resources and histories of the countries, and cooperate and coordinate with each other so that the burden of keeping refugees does not fall on some countries alone. If member countries can align their different national policies, a comprehensive refugee policy may follow. And this refugee policy needs to be based on a forward-looking and coherent strategy. It should not consist of short-term crisis management. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumaila. This was really, you were before time. No, you have still 1 minute, but thanks. You concluded earlier. It was well said. You discussed about the Dublin regulation of the European Union asylum common policy, and then it was really well researched when we are talking about the giving example of Turkey and how they are setting an example, resolving this problem and all these things. And you have talked about the Syrian and Greece problem and all this, Syrian migration, Syrian refugee and all these things. And they, ultimately you have come out with 3 solutions. One is the increase the resettlement, thing, and then you also talked about the those people who come as already asylum seekers. They lack formal qualifications, and language is a big barrier for them. So it will be better to just train them in order to enable them understand the policies of European Union. So it's really it was a good paper, and I hope in the course of our discussion, when we finish it, then we will be discussing in a little bit more detail. Thank you. Thank you. Now, may I request now Anuradha and to present the paper. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My topic is titled EU Policy for Refugees, a testing ground for the European Union. The ongoing human tragedy in Syria and the Middle East and North African region has proved to be one of the biggest humanitarian crises in recent memory. The refugee crisis, while being a humanitarian challenge, is increasingly becoming a testing ground for the European Union with regard to the political stress that the crisis ensues. With the easier and greater level of dispersion of information and ideas, the plight of refugees catches the attention of the world citizens and brings the responsiveness of the EU and its policies in sharper focus. The European Union needs a unified common strategy. But the question that also arises is the EU really going through a crisis? Is it a crisis of numbers, or is it a crisis of protection and safeguards? Is it a crisis at the periphery of Europe or at the heart of Europe? The paper has been divided into two sections. In the first half, we talk about the legal competences that the EU has, and in the second half, we try to explore if EU is really going through a crisis. In 1999, the European Council committed to work towards establishing a common European asylum system based on the full and inclusive application of the Geneva Convention. I will not explain the competences in details. I'll just like to mention them for convenience. The the key European legal instruments that regulate migration are the European Convention on Human Rights and the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, which represents the EU law. The European Court of Human Rights, ECTHR, was established under Article 9 of the ECHR. Articles 79 and 80 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union are the legal basis of EU immigration policy. The EU lays down conditions governing entry into and legal residence in a member state and may provide incentives and support for measures taken by the member states to promote integration of legally resident third country nationals. The EU Charter for Fundamental Rights guarantees the right to asylum in its Article 18. This was primary EU law. Secondary EU law that governs asylum and migration policies of the EU come in the form of directives and regulations. Every asylum request applied for in a territory goes through examination, and the purpose of Dublin regulations, as explained by Shumaila, is to provide quick access to asylum procedure by examination by a clearly determined single EU member states. Now, the various directives are the Asylum Procedure Directive, the Reception Conditions Directive, the Return Directive, the Qualification Directive. The Dublin regulations were established to deal with the problems of asylum shopping and refugees in orbit. The purpose of determining the member state responsible for examining an asylum application was to express solidarity in the EU, but often turned into burden shifting. But when faced with the massive inflow of refugees in 2015, the Dublin regulations appear to be unfair and unsustainable. The EU needs a common asylum policy following its fundamental value of solidarity in complete unity with its member states, facilitating protection and safeguard of persons so as to stand proud in its dedication to and fulfillment of human rights. The main instrument in the budget, like there are financing instruments for the also which help with the asylum and migration issues, like asylum, migration and integration fund, then European Social Fund, Fund for European Aid to the Most Deprived, and European Regional Development Fund. Now, talking about the internal as well as external dimensions of the EU's responses to the crisis are the EU Agenda on Migration, the EU-Turkey deal, a global strategy for the European Union's foreign and security policy, the Bratislava Roadmap, the Coreper of 2016, the Rome Declaration, and New Pact on Migration and Asylum, which came out recently on September 2020. Now coming to the second part of...
अरे Karen, next session का बन जाओ यार.
Hello.
Yeah, continue. There
Okay,
was some
sorry.
technical problem.
Now coming to the second part of the paper, which is EU going through a crisis? To explore this question, I've discussed about EU as having a core and a periphery. I wish I could share the screen. So a periphery is a line that forms the boundary of an area, moving anti-clockwise around the map of the Eurozone. The geographical periphery includes countries like Ireland, Portugal, Spain, Malta, Greece, and Finland. Some European countries like Hungary are relatively central, however, are yet considered peripheral countries, commonly understood as countries commonly understood as periphery are Greece, Cyprus, Malta, and Slovakia, usually represent having lower index values for GDP per capita, higher values for debt as a percentage of GDP, higher current account levels, and lower average real GDP growth. And the opposite is true for core countries like Germany and France. Let me share the screen. Okay, screening is not enabled.
What is
Hi,
the error? Sorry.
Anuradha. Hello.
Yeah, what is the error?
It says screening is not enabled.
Okay, let me just check for a second.
I think I can continue. It's fine.
What is screening? You have prepared your notes and it's not visible, or you have some PPT.
It's not. It's a table. I thought it was convenient if I could share the table, but I can read it out.
Okay, no problem in that.
I can do
case
that,
you can,
yes.
yeah.
So an article called "The Emergence of Core Periphery Structures in the European Union" that describes European Union member states as categorizes them into 4 categories: core countries, periphery countries, catch-up countries, and finance countries. So core countries would be Austria, Belgium, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, and Sweden, while periphery countries would be Cyprus, Greece, Italy, Portugal, and Spain. Then we have catch-up countries. Catch-up countries have relatively low levels of wages like Bulgaria, Romania, Czech Republic, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Hungary, Poland, Slovenia, and Slovakia. They're similar to periphery, but they have higher degree of foreign ownership, small service sector, and important manufacturing sector, but low levels of GDP and wages. Then we have the finance countries. These are high debt levels of private firms like Luxembourg, Netherlands, Malta, and Ireland. So what was on the table was us trying to compare core countries with the GDP levels of periphery countries. And in the table that's in the paper, countries like Belgium, Denmark, Germany, France, Austria, Finland, and Sweden have higher levels of GDP compared to the catch-up, the finance countries. Sorry. So the core countries had high levels of GDP, while the finance countries had even more higher levels of GDP, and the periphery countries had much lower levels of GDP, real GDP per capita. Again, then I compared those countries with the migration data portal of the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UNDISA 2020, which provides the total stock of migrant population of different European countries. So in that table, Germany, Austria, the core countries like Germany, Austria, France, they had they shared higher responsibility of third country nationals, ranging from 1.7 million, which was Austria, to 15.8 million, which is Germany. While the periphery countries, with the exception of Cyprus, had also taken up responsibility of third country nationals at par with certain core countries like Greece, Italy, Portugal, Spain. Greece was the lowest. Greece and Portugal were the lowest. Spain and Italy were around 6.4 million. Then again, it's the countries of the 2004 enlargement of the EU that showed shying numbers. Bulgaria, Hungary, Czechia, Slovak Republic, Slovenia, Poland, Malta, Cyprus, they had shying numbers. So the refugee and migrant crisis has been one of the most significant and divisive issues in European politics. To present the dichotomy between core countries and periphery countries, we take very few cases. We take the cases of Germany, Hungary, Sweden, and Czechia to compare. So Germany presented itself as the primary favored destination, followed by France and Italy, which is the gateway to Europe. The words "we can do this" had a great impact to build confidence for the task lying ahead. And there's also the whole economics of €1 jobs. Germany partially closed its borders with Austria and Czech Republic as recent as on February 2021, stating risks of COVID variants. Then Hungary.
Radha, just conclude it yourself, because now it's the time. You have already crossed the time. So conclude in 1 minute.
So I'll need 3 minutes and I'll be done.
Okay.
Hungary has been ardently against opening its borders to the refugees, be it investment of more than 100 millions on fencing and border controls, and xenophobic billboard campaigns, and brutal pushbacks, and people living in transit zones. Sweden had proven to be a safe haven for refugees. It accepts both quota refugees through UNHCR and has approximately received 160 applications during 2015. But even in Sweden, one of the most liberal countries in Europe, the far-right Sweden Democrats that rose from the white supremacist and neo-Nazi fringe massively bolstered their vote share. Then there's Czechia. Czechia has quickly transformed from a land of emigration to a land of immigration, and is one of the Visegrad groups of countries which have a strong policy against refugee crisis. So the Europe's anti-migration hardliners, the chief concern is that asylum hotspots and camps should be outside EU territory. And the problem with the crisis is more about seeing migration and migrants and refugees as a threat to homogeneity, as the others to trying to delegitimize them. That makes the phenomenon a crisis. There is more left. Maybe I could do that in the
question answer session. That will be good. Okay, Radha, it's a really nice paper, and we can understand the limitations. Not with the researchers, but also due to this pandemic. That we have a lot of limitation. So keeping those limitations in mind, it's a good paper, and we must appreciate your paper. You have rightly highlighted the crisis which European Union having on the issues of asylum policy, particularly when you talked about the crisis of numbers and the crisis of safeguarding. And then, despite of European common European asylum convention policy, they do face challenges of being a core and referee, periphery member, and you have rightly categorized it in 4 categories. That one is core and periphery member of European Union, and catch-up countries, and as well as the finance countries. You have rightly observed what the basically economic status of a country, how they look at this problem of refugee and migration, and how they are safeguarding their national interest. They are talking about the common European policy, but they look at for their nation state. So they want to safeguard their national interest first here. So here, you have rightly said how this bone of contention among a very periphery member and a core member and different member who have become member of European Union much later, and they still having this kind of feeling that the policy which is being framed there at Brussels, they are imposed on the unwilling members of the European Union because their internal conditions are not congenial to the condition of the core members. As Germany had a tough time, and even she was facing a big challenge when American President, the ex-American President Donald Trump had gone criticizing Angela Merkel, saying that there will a lot of Brexit in European Union due to refugee crisis, and Germany has opened the door for the refugees, and this was some sort of a statement given by Donald Trump, keeping the interest of American foreign policy in mind, and this was some sort of a message of disunity among the European Union. But despite of that, they are resolving these problems. So let me tell you, it was a good paper, and I wish you all the best for the next session, question and answer session. Now, Nagraj,
Yes.
yes, you start your paper now.
Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Sat Sarkar for giving me opportunity to present a paper. So topic of my paper is refugee crisis, the politics of migration and its implications on the nature of borders. So, the EU open border policy has been the landmark policy since the end of Cold War, because, the Schengen Agreement has Schengen Agreement established the, European open border region, in which the internal borders have been eliminated. The fundamental objective behind this, Schengen border was to establish whole and free Europe, where the free mobility of goods, services, and people have been enabled. And in a broader framework, this was a reflection of this was a reflection of EU's political values and values, which like rule of law and democracy, human rights, and free movement. So so in a way, Schengen Agreement has it has also changed the nature of borders. Like several borders of the EU member states acquired the nature of openness, softness, and flexibility in their functionality. But with the advent of this 2015 refugee crisis, I think the understanding of the borders, the concept of borders, has gone back to the traditional understanding, which was drawn by the Westphalian idea of borders. Which were primarily premised on the notion that the borders are associated with the identity, sovereignty, sanctity, and so on. So one of the American political scientists who has extensively worked on this concept of borders try to identify and call this changing nature of European borders in terms of like unbounding and rebounding process, by which he means that the present phenomenon of borders is riddled with conflicts, where the party of territoriality attempts to restore and strengthen the Westphalian ideas of borders has come in conflict with the party of globalists, who seeks to overcome the geographic boundaries which act as an obstacle to the movement of goods. And the emerging dichotomy with regard to the refugee crisis and the one perception of the border and perception of migration stems from the fact that there are dichotomies, there are there are a difference of perception in their standing, how one pursues the refugee crisis. If you look at the core Europe, which is like Germany and France, which have been taken which have preceded a which have superseded humanitarian values than humanity perception, which is based on the humanity rather than security. Whereas Central and Eastern European countries, which are continue to root for the security of the security, the security of the external borders is the focal point of European EU dealing with the refugee crisis. And the changing nature is not something which has which has come up with the changing nature of European borders is not something new which has come up with the only which is followed up by the refugee crisis, but can be traced back to the process of the expansion initiative which was undertaken by the Europe. With the expansion, the process of widening and deepening, so the Schengen borders also become expanded, and new geopolitical reality unfolded. Like several member states of the EU, the geography of the several member states of the EU become closer to the belligerent states like Russia and the failed states, where they become where they become vulnerable. So it becomes very natural for them to adopt a very hard approach. If you look at the countries which are primarily adopting a hardened approach to the border security are the ones which are which are in a closer proximity to the flow of refugees. So like Hungary, when the refugee crisis unfolded in 2015, the countries like Hungary, Slovenia, and Austria and Greece, they are the one who built walls and erected fences with the barbed wires to prevent the refugees from entering in. So in a way, this and also if you look at the kind of after the Schengen agreement, if you look at the kind of border control mechanisms which were initiated by the EU, so they were very heavily technologically advanced. So they were in a way like they have, at present those border control mechanisms have transformed from being merely a facilitator of the smoothing of the process of migrants and refugees to creating an obstacle for the migrants. Whereas several one of the scholar like Rumford, who tries to identify the different multi-facets of the borders that have come up with this advent of open border system. Like he tries to identify few like e-borders, juxtaposed borders, smart borders, offshore borders. These are some of the mechanisms that he tries to classify. And the Rajaram, there is another scholar who is central, who works in
you can conclude in 1 minute. So your time is up almost.
Rajaram argues that the EU's failure to develop consensus with regard to dealing with the refugee crisis has put this security of the external borders at the focal point. So therefore this has also created a this has also and also several politicians are using the notion of strengthening external borders as an instrumental to consolidate their own power, and militarization of the borders has become a dominant frame. Like Viktor Orban, who tries to politicize the concept of borders and migration so powerfully that he sought to challenge the fundamental values of Europe by trying to build a parallel narrative where the EU, which is dictated by not by the liberal values like rule of law, democracy, but dictated by identity, culture, security, and border. So in this way, it has also these migration and borders have become have positioned this refugee crisis has positioned this migration and borders in such a place that they are they are being politicized powerfully, because they stoke the sentiments and emotions associated with identity culture. So the most of these emotions, most of these issues that have been left behind by the center left parties are being articulated well by the center right parties. So therefore, if you look at the electoral, if you look at the vote share or the parliamentary 2019 outcome of the 2019 parliamentary election, so you can see that there is a drastic rise in the the share of the far right parties in the European Parliament as well as the national governments. So, if you look at 2014, it was 20%, and at present it is 25% of the which has been which has been taken away by the small Eurosceptic parties. But here Euroscepticism does not mean that they want to dismantle you or they want to exit you. It just means that they want to they want to create an alternative narrative which suits because this kind of this urge to create an alternative narrative stems from the fact that I think there is an experience of marginalization and neglect in terms of decision making process. So there is an always attempt by the Viktor Orban to create a coalition of the right wing politicians who tries to build an alternative narrative. I would like to conclude by saying that the EU, the present refugee crisis has unfolded as several domestic crises, from borders to the solidarity crisis. It has also damaged the EU's ability to forge a consensus domestically, and also damaged its image globally by and it so. I would like to end.
Okay, so Nagaraj, you have finished?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fine. So we had, I think, for some reason, Professor Prasad has logged out. He must be having some issues. So let us just take a quick stock of the 3 papers that have been presented. And let me first open it up for discussion. If you have any questions, comments, please come up with them. I can see there are some around 49 participants, so I'm sure that somebody would have some question, clarification, or comments.
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a question to Anuradha Sinha. As you have been talking about the migration and your paper is revolving around it, do you think the migration crisis is over, or it has been attributed more with the pandemic and stuff?
Ma'am, can I answer?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you, Nikhil. On March 2019, the EU's migration chief, Avramopoulos, I cannot pronounce his name, announced that the refugee crisis is over. But the structural problems remain. The Europe's migration crisis isn't just about numbers. Though 2015 showed us that it was not ready for unprecedented the numbers that happened, but it's also about prejudice. The rise of populism plays a big role in the demonization of third country nationals and the policies undertaken. Like Ma'am Bhashwati said in the beginning of the conference, our responses have shifted from unconditional welcome to outright rejections. The IOM, in a recent press release dated February 21, criticizes the EU and its member states and calls on them to end pushbacks, violence against migrants and refugees, including children, at the borders. So Europe, the European Union, has on its side the unity of a union that is unique in its kind, over and above the statistics of being a thriving economy. The irony is that while trying to move away from the concept of territorial sovereignty towards a European sentiment, it is the territorial belongingness of an individual that is deciding upon the protection and safeguards that it can get guaranteed from the Union. So yeah, that's my answer.
Sorry, actually, in between I got disconnected. So Nagaraj, sorry, I could not listen your concluding part, but more or less it was a good thing. And now, since I believe it's a question and session is started, so Professor Sarkar is there, so Big Boss is watching us. So I was not worried when I was not there on the screen. So I hope the session will go on again. Okay. So if someone of you have some comment, observation, or queries and all, so you can ask each other. And our faculties are also there. I hope Professor Sadeva is also here, and other colleagues of ours. And they are welcome to encourage our research scholar by your comment, your observation.
Sumbul, go ahead.
So ma'am, I just want to add, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes, I just want to add to what Nikhil asked, that is the refugee crisis over? And responding to what the EU said that in 2019 it's over. So I would like to draw the attention that probably EU is saying from the perspective of the incoming numbers. So yes, the numbers coming into Europe have, certainly plummeted, but then what is one thing which a lot of I think EU people don't identify is there have been an increasing number of sea deaths in the so it's not that the refugee crisis has subsided because the numbers are not coming into Europe, but because a lot of people from these developing countries, especially from the war-torn countries, are leaving their home, but they are not able to reach Europe because there has been such a dramatic increase in the number of sea deaths. So I don't think so that the refugee crisis in general has ended that way, because people are still leaving. There is more number of sea deaths, and although there is this whole system of Frontex which is put in place to ensure that there is patrolling of borders and all that, but then I think that it's not, I don't consider it as a situation wherein the refugee crisis has really subsided, I would say. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah. So Sumbul, I maybe I didn't express it in my when I ended it. I do not believe that the crisis is over. The numbers are much less than how it started, but I was drawing to the rise of populism also, and also the economies of different countries also being a factor in deciding how states are reacting to it. I do not believe that the crisis is over.
No, I was just commenting on the EU side, because there was this, policy which EU introduced last year only, which has received a lot of flack from the international organizations, where it said that now if the countries who don't want to take in members, who don't want to take in refugees, would now assist the EU to help them go back to their home country. So this was really something which was criticized by the Council of Europe, by the UNHCR. So I was just trying to draw the attention of the attendees to the fact that what EU is saying is a very narrow view of looking at the refugee crisis and whether it has ended or not. Just, issuing a statement that the refugee crisis has ended will not put an end to the larger, things that go around the focal point of the refugee crisis, which is like, in terms of incoming numbers and inflow of, refugees and migrants. So.
Okay, can I just come in? I can see Professor Khadria continues to be with us. So I would like sir to, sort of comment on the papers presented. And I have also seen Professor Jairaj Amin with us. So if both of them can just, sort of add their comments to the sessions that we have already had. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Baswati, for inviting me, but I really enjoyed listening to the students, and I have no comments to make at this juncture. Thank you.
Your gesture is very good, sir, and really it is encouraging for we, all the faculty here, as well as our researchers. So it is a nice gesture, sir, by intervening this way. Thank you.
Essen, you can take over now and wrap up the session.
Okay. Okay, all the presenters, congratulations for presenting your paper in different ways and with different perception. It was really good to know a lot of new things from all of you three. And basically, as it was said in the beginning of the session or in the inaugural session, that Europe is having a big challenge as far as question of refugee and asylum policy is concerned. Basically, in a way, they take this challenge according to the politics of their convenience, as their division of opinion in European Union on this question. Germany requires people who are called immigrants or migrants, because this is the need of this is the need of their industry and other sector of economy. So they need man for their sectors, labor. So as you have said, some core member of the European Union, since they have very good economy in compared to the people, the countries who have recently joined, with the hope that due to a lot of common policy of European Union, their economy will be also integrated in the economy of European Union. But over the years of joining, they have realized that it is the policy of, as I said, it is a politics of convenience for the core member of the European Union, which is being imposed on the periphery members or the new members of the European Union. And it is also true, the European Union has been facing the age of aging, the problem of aging, where Europe are lacking manpower, and after some time it is predicted that the whole Europe will be not in a position to move forward due to lack of manpower. So from this point of view, there's a view or there's an opinion that we need people, refugee or migrants, and accordingly we have to come out with a new system of dealing with this thing, whether it should be a common policy for all the countries, all the member states. So there is differences. But as I have said, Europeans have been very practical in dealing with the situation, and they have been able to adopt and adapt according to the current situation. And that's why, still, despite of a lot of challenges, they still remain on the top as far as their as far as their European values are concerned. And due to the sense of belongingness of European values, where some of you have talked about the reflection of European values, human rights, democracy, rule of law, all sort of things, which is also the crux of today's conference, which is discussed under the human chair of democracy, diversity, and European values and all. So ultimately, it was a very fruitful session. And I also want to thank Professor Vasavi Sarkar, as well as our chairperson, Professor Gulshan Sachdeva, and all the guest faculty who are watching us from different corner of our country. And you are privileged to be in a company with those seniors and the expert of this area. And we really feel privileged to chair this session. I thank you all. Thanks a lot.
I would now like to thank Professor Prasad for ably chairing this session. I would also like to thank all the presenters for this session for their well-researched presentations. We will be now moving into a lunch break till 2 p.m. The link for the conference remains the same. You can log back in and join the conference through the same link. I would also like to request the panelists for the third working session, that is securitization of migration, to join in 5 minutes before by 1:50, 1:55. So we can do a quick mic check and also start the next session on time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Only us left, kya?
Hi, I put everyone else in the waiting room.
Are you saying something to me?
Okay, wait.
मैं यही हूँ मैं यही हूँ Thank you.
Ma'am mentioned
I
that.
think it went on absolutely smoothly, other than that whatever screen sharing which Anuradha had to do.
Now we've enabled it.
That's okay. It's okay. Okay.
We also have 56 responses on the attendance form for the first half.
Yeah, I think there were roughly 56.
57.
Obviously, the faculty won't fill in the attendance. So that
Yes, have you stopped the recording now?
I'll
Oh yeah,
stop
sorry.
it.